Born at the turn of the 20th century, at a time when votes for women were just a dream, Diana Mitford saw politics as not just a realm for dusty grey cigar smoking men, but as a place in which she could imprint her courageous yet provocative ideals. The only problem with that is, she was a massive fascist. She is probably most well known today for marrying the famous British politician and leader of the failed British Union of Fascists party, Oswald Mosley. Like they say, behind every great man, there's an even greater woman. But her story is much more interesting than that, evident by the fact that this video was requested in the comments of my video on Mosley himself. Always appreciate suggestions in the comments, thank you for that. Despite openly being involved in fascist politics during the run-up to World War II, Mitford was active in the public eye up until her death in 2003. But her interest in life leaves us with many questions, such as: what shaped Diana Mitford's controversial political ideals? How did she manage to stay in the public eye after World War II? And to what extent did Diana influence Oswald Mosley's pivot to fascism? Well, make sure to keep watching because this short 7-minute documentary will cover all and more. And if you like this video, please subscribe and let me know in the comments if there are any other topics that you would like to see me cover. Diana Mitford, or later known as Lady Diana Mosley, was born in 1910 as the fourth child of Baron David Freeman Mitford and Sydney Bowles. Diana's generation of the Mitford family became quite notorious during the 1930s. In particular, Diana and her 5 sisters, who were seen as scandalous figures by the British media, being described in the Times newspaper as Diana the Fascist, Jessica the Communist, Unity the Hitler Lover, Nancy the Novelist, Deborah the Duchess, and Pamela the Unobtrusive Party Connoisseur. With all 6 sisters gaining widespread attention from British columnists for their stylish and controversial lives, making them pretty much the Kardashians of their day. But only if Kim was a massive communist and Kylie was a big believer in totalitarian governments. All of the sisters were successful in their own right, whether for the right or the wrong reasons. Jessica turned her back on her inheritance and instead eloped with her cousin to fight in the International Brigade and report on the Spanish Civil War. Nancy wrote 2 best-selling books. Deborah managed Chatsworth House, which is one of the most successful stately homes in England, and Pamela became an unashamed partygoer and socialite, with both Unity and Diana going on to become close with Adolf Hitler in the 1930s. But although each of the sisters are interesting in their own right, this video will just be focusing on Diana and her relationship with the infamous British politician Oswald Mosley. Diana first met Oswald Mosley at a garden party in 1932. She was already highly sympathetic to Nazi and fascist movements growing through Europe, and Mosley was a successful politician who had just become the leader of the British Union of Fascists, so there was a natural attraction for her. She soon became his lover, and despite Mosley refusing to leave his wife, the two were clearly enamoured with each other, with both Mitford's and Mosley's fascist ideologies complementing each other. Almost a match made in heaven. Diana was already married herself to Brian Walter Guinness, with whom she had 2 sons. However, the marriage didn't last long when Mosley's first wife, Lady Cynthia, died in 1933. Diana left Guinness for Mosley, a move which caused outrage from her parents and strained relations with her sisters, with the belief that she was living a life of sin by being with Mosley. Diana grew to have a particular interest in the rise of Nazism and fascist ideologies in Germany throughout the 1930s, and often visited with her sister Unity, with Diana even meeting Adolf Hitler in 1935 after it was revealed her sister Unity was already on friendly terms with him. After meeting with Hitler and spending time questioning him, Diana became fascinated by him, and Hitler likewise with Diana and Unity, describing the sisters as angels. Diana slowly got herself entangled in the upper echelons of the Nazi party, being entertained as a guest during rallies and even being provided with a chauffeur-driven Mercedes-Benz to get to the Berlin Olympics in. Over her many visits, Diana had become close to Magda Goebbels, the wife of Joseph Goebbels, and eventually when Diana and Oswald decided to marry, they did so in the drawing room of Joseph Goebbels' house, with Hitler himself attending. Now Lady Mosley, Diana became so involved in her husband's activities that she was photographed speaking at meetings and rallies on his behalf. With her increased involvement in her husband's fascist party and her links to Hitler in Germany in the run-up to World War II, both husband and wife were investigated by MI5 and seen as potential threats to the British state. According to secret MI5 documents that were declassified in 2001, Diana was even seen as a bigger threat than Oswald, with the document stating that she was far cleverer than her husband and would stop at nothing to realise her ambitions. The worry could have been linked to the fact that while Diana had strong links to the upper levels of the Nazi party, she was also well connected to the British establishment, with her being on close terms with Winston Churchill himself. Continually being seen as a threat in the run-up to World War II, it was only a matter of time before they were arrested when the war broke out. The couple were separated and placed in internment, but eventually the pair were allowed to be together again after a personal intervention by Winston Churchill himself, and eventually in 1943 the pair were released due to Oswald's failing health, but were placed under house arrest until the end of the war, and they didn't even receive their passports back until 1948. The couple were largely unrepentant in their views, but most likely knew Britain would have no appetite for a fascist movement after fighting the Nazis, so the pair moved to France to live out the rest of their days, and ironically became neighbours to the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, also known as Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson, who were also seen as Nazi sympathisers due to their close links with Hitler before and during the war. While they lived a lavish life, hosting parties and travelling, they could never comfortably move back to Britain. They were barred from events at the British Embassy, and Diana even became distant with most of her family. Despite the result of World War II and the collapse of fascist support in Britain, Diana remained a lifelong supporter of Oswald's former party even after his death in 1980. She spent much of her later life writing, interviewing, and still being a public figure, despite her views. This puts a spotlight on many of her views, however, being accused of Holocaust denialism, being on record as saying that even though she was horrified by the image of concentration camps, it still wouldn't tarnish the image she had and the thoughts she held of Adolf Hitler, and she even admitted that she holds the bad moustache man in the same regard as Winston Churchill. Her controversial views came to the limelight again in 1989 when she appeared on the BBC's Desert Island Discs and openly admitted that for years after the war she did not believe the Holocaust happened and that she thought the official death toll was too high, not to mention some questionable music choices to be stranded on a desert island with. Eventually Diana moved into an apartment in Paris due to her advancing age, before becoming one of the victims of the 2003 heatwave in Paris, which claimed the lives of many elderly Parisians and Diana as well. Her body was brought back to England and buried alongside her sisters in Oxfordshire. Now there's no doubting that Diana Mitford was a woman of great ambition. However, it's obvious, like with her second husband Oswald, her ideals were unfounded. Her foray into fascism cost her the relationship with her family, her reputation, and her freedom during and after World War II. However, for all her faults, nothing can deny the ambition she showed, aligning herself with powerful figures on both sides of politics, holding as good a relationship with Hitler as she did with Churchill. She was evidently primed to become one of the most powerful and influential women in British politics, holding her own within her husband's political party, giving talks at rallies and clearly influencing her husband's decisions. Either way, Diana will be remembered as a woman who was behind British fascist Oswald Mosley, a woman who was good friends with Hitler, and ultimately a woman whose reputation was tarnished. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel where I'll be making more content like this. I really appreciate you watching and look forward to seeing you again next time.